Hi, my name is Terry Doherty. I am the designer of the Glory and Empire series by Lock and Load Publishing. In this video, we're going to discuss the sequence of play and command and control for the soldiers and battalion game rules. So a game turn starts off with the weather phase, although in the first games in the series, the weather is always clear, so that's kind of moot. The second phase is the command segment, which is quite important. So the first thing the players do during the command segment is to roll for initiative. Each player rolls a single 10-sided die and adds his command initiative modifier for his particular leader that's on the map at that time to the die roll. The high die roll wins. If the die roll is a tie, then players re-roll the dice. If either player rolls a 0, then we check for random events. Winning the initiative is important for two reasons. The player who wins the initiative gets to choose which player goes first that turn. And secondly, the player who won the initiative also gets to watch the other player place his orders first, before placing his own. Good leaders like Napoleon will be able to win the initiative all the time, and will be able to set himself up for the double turn whenever he feels like. Following the initiative phase is the command attachment phase. In this phase, players can attach units like artillery or cavalry to other commands and leaders. After that, it's time to place orders. There are two types of orders, attack and reserve, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. And last, leaders that did not receive orders can try and roll for their own initiative to gain an order. So the player that was designated to go first goes through his player turn before the second player then does the same thing for his player turn. So the first up is the recovery segment. Players rally troops that are eligible to rally. Cavalry can try and recover their spent markers. Artillery can resupply in the battalion game, and in the brigade game they can attempt fatigue recovery. During the fire segment, all units on the phasing player's side may fire that are eligible to fire. During the artillery fire segment, the non-phasing player's artillery can return fire. During the movement segment, phasing player units check their command status to see if they're still in command, and they may move if they are eligible to. Non-phasing player units that also have a reserve order can move during the reserve segment. They also check command status here to see if they are in command. Reserve orders can be used to reinforce a position if it looks like the enemy is going to attack, or perhaps to unlimber some artillery or deploy some cavalry, or just to withdraw and refuse combat if necessary. So the final segment of a player turn is the close combat segment. This is where we resolve charges, then assaults, and finally in the brigade game we would check fatigue for any units that are involved in assaults or charges. So after the first player turn is complete, the second player will then go through all the steps again for his player turn. You may have noticed the colors in the sequence of play. These correspond to the color of the text on the markers indicating the segment in which they are removed. At the end of the turn, leaders that were casualties in the previous turn come back into play during the leader replacement phase. In the brigade game, we go through a couple of extra steps and then we advance the turn marker. So now we'll take a more in-depth look on the command and control rules in the soldiers and battalion game rules. We'll take a look at the brigade game rules later. They build upon these rules, so what you learn here won't be lost. The element of the command and control rules is the player initiative segment. And players each roll a die and add their command initiative modifier to the die roll for the leader that is presently on the map. So if Junot was on the map, then he would add 2. If his replacement is on the map, which is General Tabo, he will add 1. So each player rolls a die, adds the command initiative modifier. The high die roll wins. Ties are re-rolled, and if either player rolls a 0, then we then roll another die and index the random events chart. So the random events chart will then show who won the initiative for the turn and then have an event that the player is to execute for that turn. Primary importance of winning the initiative is to get to decide which player goes first that turn. So the player that wins initiative, if they let the other guy go first, then they're potentially setting themselves up for a double turn if they win the initiative on the following turn. So in the case of Napoleon, where he'll probably have a really high initiative when he's in his prime, he'll get to decide on when he wants to do a double turn pretty much at will. The second effect of winning the initiative is you get to see where the other player places his orders before you have to place yours. So the initiative roll, the modified initiative roll, is used to index the number of orders on the command table. So you can see here, if the British roll high, they get 3 orders, and same for the French. And there's not a lot of orders per turn. Orders can be attack or reserve, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Leaders. There are 3 types of leaders: overall commanders, ordinary leaders like brigade leaders, division leaders, corps leaders, and aides de camp. So a little bit of the markings on the counters. So an overall commander has a sash on their, over the top of their uniform. A ordinary leader has no such marking. And then aides have a little bit of braid over their right shoulder. And they also have no echelon markings. So if you look at the stripe in the middle of the counter, then you can kind of see the echelon of the commander. So as you know, there has 3 X's for an army leader, and Delabord has 2 X's for a division leader. The circle is their command range. The lower left number is the leader initiative modifier, and the exponent is their efficiency rating, which we'll get to in a little bit. Then the value in the green box is their combat value modifier. The value in the white box is a fire strength modifier that they get to add when they are in command of an artillery battery. And then the lower right number is their morale modifier that they can apply to any unit they're stacked with. Delabord has a command range of 4. He's got a fire strength modifier of 2, a combat value modifier of 3. His leader initiative modifier is 3, and he's got a morale bonus of 8. So aides de camp can be used for any purpose the player needs, like rallying, helping to rally troops, or leading assaults and charges to add their modifiers to those attacks. Leader becomes a casualty through fire combat or through close combat, or if he gets captured, then he gets flipped to his replacement side, revealing his repel side. In this case, Junot's replacement is General Tabo, which is his chief of staff. So when that happens, we'll also remove the corresponding leader with the same name from the map. So, and then at the same time, the repo leader is removed from the map as well. And then he's brought back in 1 full turn later at the end of the turn of the following turn, so that whoever's units he commands, they will be out of command for a full turn. Is a casualty a second time, then you go through the same process, except we just retain the replacement value side, assuming it's some other leader that steps into that. So the command display shows the command hierarchy of the army and the units assigned to particular leaders. So if we kind of zoom in here, Junot is the overall commander. His command range to subordinates is 5 hexes. Then we have the general of cavalry, which is General Margeron. His command range to his units, or to his brigade leaders, is 5. And in turn, Colonel Weiss and Colonel Theron have a range of 3 to their subordinate units. And the color in the on the lines and the circles obviously matches the stripe on the units indicating the division. So in the soldiers and battalion games, the command status is determined by the number of hexes between the leader and the units that they command. So for brigade leaders, we can see here that Tomiers is command range 3 in the circle of his unit. And then Brenier, his command range is 3 also to his units, which they have white on the bottom half of their counter, whereas Tomiers has gray on the bottom half of his counter. And then Delabord is their division leader, who has a command range of 4, which he traces from himself to Brenier or Tomiers. So obviously units that are broken or routed are not in command. So they are just operating under their own retreat rules, where they have to run away and try and rally. Battalions that are in full skirmish order must take a command check to be in command, and a command check is a roll against their morale value. So here we have a couple of some units that could deploy into full skirmish order in Brenier's command, the units with the bugle on the counter. So if they were in full skirmish order, the 3-4 battalion of the Legere infantry, we would have to roll 41 or higher than 41 to be in command. Otherwise, they have reduced MA, reduced movement allowance, and they cannot have orders like attack or reserve. So overall, commanders are a little bit different when it comes to command range. They have a command range value, but it only applies to units that report directly to them as shown on the command display. So these units are all such units, and they're identified as being a able to be cross-attached to other units by having the little black stripes on the sides of the stripe in the middle of the counter, which identifies them as assets. So they can be attached to subordinate division leaders or subordinate brigade leaders, or they can report directly to Juno as long as they stay within 5 hexes of him. Units that are out of command cannot receive orders, and they march at a reduced movement rate. Glory and Empire, there are 2 types of orders. There's attack orders and reserve orders. Attack orders allow units to assault or charge. They may still opportunity charge or reaction charge, but in order to launch a full-scale assault or a full-scale charge, you need an attack order. Reserve orders allow a player to move his units after the opposing player has moved his units, but before he gets to assault or charge. So that allows you to deploy some reserves or withdraw from combat as necessary. So orders are assigned to leaders. So in this case, we have an attack order assigned to Delabord. So Delabord and any units that report directly to him have the attack order. And so any of his subordinate leaders that are also in command and would also have that order. And any of their units that are also in command would have the order. So in this case, both of Delabord's brigade leaders are in command, as are all of their units. So all of these units would be in command. So if Tomier's units were a couple more hexes away, then they would not be in command of Delabord and could not be part of the order. But a player could place a second attack order on that brigade. And as you saw from the charts earlier, the number of orders are quite limited, so trying to gain these efficiencies by keeping everyone in command is important. An order can also be given to the overall commander, but in this case, the order would only apply to units that are reporting directly to him. So that is units that are within 5 hexes of Juno and have the indication that on the command display that they are his direct reports. So one last thing about command and control. In the battalion game, but not in the soldiers game, leaders that are out of command can roll for initiative if they don't have an order already. So in this case, if Tomier's was out of command, he could roll less than 1 to gain his own order. So for most leaders, it's a small chance that they will gain initiative. But one special effect of the overall commander is that he can lend his modifier to a number of subordinates equal to his efficiency rating. So as you know, his efficiency rating is 1, which is the exponent by the 2 there. So he could lend his initiative of 2 to 1 leader. So he could lend his initiative to Tomier's and making his initiative value of 3. So he'd have to roll less than 3 to gain an initiative order at that point. So in this case, the leader does not have to be within Juno's command range. He can be anywhere on the map. So that covers just about everything for the soldiers game and battalion game, sequence of play, and command rules. Thank you for listening.